Good morning, Pravir Malik, who is joining us today on The Essence at Community Global Internet Radio. And Pravir, I have known you for years, almost from a distance, but today, finally, we are meeting face to face for a while. And I'm so pleased to have you on The Essence. And speaking about what you've done in the past, 25 or 30 years, it's been remarkable. You are like Mr. Math.
Well, thank you, Dan. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Well, tell us, how did you ever launch into the world of fractals, math? I was going over some of the books you've written, and honestly, Pravir, talk about every topic that is scientific. Somehow you have managed to write about. A Story of Light, Oceans of Innovation, Cosmology of Light, Redesigning the Stock Market. Really, Pravir? I hope they listen to you.
Yeah. So actually, Dan, there's been kind of a logic to the madness, if you will. And I would say that it just started off from a real curiosity to understand things at a deeper level. And I started off my career, I was a computer engineer, computer scientist, but then I switched into business consulting, and that's where a lot of the questions began to occur. So not so much in the scientific field, but in the organizational field, because there were issues that I was running into that just completely boggled me. They were irrational because it seemed like there was a logic as to how we should proceed from a business point of view or on an organizational point of view, but that was rarely done. And that began to incite my interest, in a sense, to go deeper and deeper into why organizations behave the way they do. And in doing that, what happened was that I began to notice patterns that exist across different domains. So just thinking about it organizationally, so, whether you're looking at the marketing department or finance or accounting or operations, but you see similar patterns that constrain how things are thought through and assumptions people make. And so what happened as a result of that is I began to piece together a framework, a systems framework, where there was this similar pattern that seemed to animate how different thinking and perceptions took place. And that led to my writing this series of books on fractals, which is a repeating pattern. Yeah. And, as I began to go deeper into that, then the whole sense of what really is a system and why does it behave the way it does is what arose. And that was my launching pad into the subsequent writings and things.
Wow. Well, it's an amazing variety of topics, and I feel like I'm going to have to delve into a few of these because they really caught my interest. Could you tell us a little bit about, you didn't wake up one day and suddenly you had all of this going on in your mind. What was your education like, Pravir?
Well, so it was a combination, I would say, of just spontaneous experience that always had a mysterious feel to it. There was something that I wanted to know more of, but was unsatisfied with. So, for example, a spontaneous experience that I had was when I was a child. I would have this recurring experience of when I had fever of seeing myself in a drop of water, and it would be falling slowly, and then I would see myself in another drop of water, and that was it was mysterious.
Yes.
And I never quite understood it.
Yeah.
But it's that kind of experience kind of juxtaposed with a more traditional education, if you will. And at some point, the two of these began to merge, where the kinds of things that I began to understand rationally were giving me a sense of what might be happening on that mysterious front, if you will. So.
Wow. Well, one of the mysteries that you've delved into has been light.
Yeah.
And what caught your interest in the essence of light?
Yeah. So, it started off I was telling you about the fractals and about
Right.
systems thinking, and it occurred to me that the way systems operate, they're regardless of the kind of system we're looking at, there's some common organizational principles. And very, very broadly speaking, I would call those principles the principle of knowledge, of harmony, of presence or adventure, and power, say. And so there's four common principles. And to me, the question was, how deep do these principles go? To what degree are systems showing those kind of principles regardless of area? And that's where I began to go deeper and deeper into the kinds of systems that we're exposed to. So for example, I started off with business systems, but then got into physical systems and then asked the question to myself, does a similar organization exist at the cellular level? And for example, I found that to be the case with four molecular plans that animate any cell, nucleic acids, polysaccharides, proteins, and lipids. But to cut a long story short, I kept going deeper and deeper into where do these principles emanate from? And that's where I came face to face with light. Because to me, it seemed like all these principles originated from light, and that's really what caught my interest in it. And to give you an example, as I began to delve more into the mysteries of light, it occurred to me that every single atom that exists has been forged in the light of the stars, light of the suns, or in the math of supernova. And so everything by definition, whether it's animate matter or inanimate matter, has a very deep signature of light inside it. So just fundamentally, whatever we are, and even if we look at our hands, there is a deep, deep signature and essence or presence of light that just pervades it. And then the question is, does it stop there? And another thing that I discovered was that if we think about what's the most common quantum particle, it's a photon. 98% of quantum particles are photons, and they're carriers of light. So essentially, when we look around us, the only way we become aware of our surroundings or of what exists around us is through the action of these photons, which continuously carry information into our eyes and recreate this image of the world around us. So in other words, we're deeply grounded or embedded in a massive light-based operating system. So without that action of light, we wouldn't be able to exist or operate or understand anything around us. So that further kind of reinforces this prime place that light has. And then even if we think about nutrition of any living being, we can trace it back to the process of photosynthesis, which is really at the beginning of the food chain, if you will. And that, again, is nothing but the action of light that's being converted into a chemical energy, at the level of cells, you can say. So everything. So without light, we wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be able to make sense of what's going on. Our very structure wouldn't be able to be created. We wouldn't be able to continue in existence because nutrition would fail if it wasn't for light. So light's fundamental to our existence. And this was just the beginning of kind of the scientific facts, if you will, to unveil or to understand what light is more deeply. And I can go on, but let me just pause for a sec, in case you...
Well, I do have one question for you. So is light a vibration? What exactly is light?
So I think that's a great question. And the way that I see light, or the way I perceive or think of light, is that it's multidimensional. Okay. And the vibrational aspect is certainly a way which it makes itself known to us. And we scientifically, we are aware of that vibration or that existence of the wave in what we call the electromagnetic spectrum, for instance.
Right, exactly.
Which is nothing but, in a sense, a propagating vibration. of infinite number of frequencies or wavelengths. And so light's known as that electromagnetic spectrum. So in some sense, it's a vibration, but that to me is nothing but a projection of light in a more primary substance of what light is.
Wow.
So light makes itself known to us, certainly amongst its different kind of faces, also as this face of the electromagnetic spectrum that is responsible for so much of our current infrastructure and technology, for whether it's our cell phones or computers or whatever we're thinking about, in terms of the technology that drives our current world. It's all of it is derived from some kind of mechanism of light. Okay.
So like consciousness, is that part of light, or is that its own area?
No, so to me, there's an equivalence between them. And so if I think about, again, just starting from it scientifically, and if I think about the way that we understand light just physically is that it travels at 186,000 miles per second. It's a constant speed in this physical universe.
Yes,
but suppose we extrapolate and we ask, what if light traveled infinitely fast? And then we can do a thought experiment to get a sense for the kind of reality that would be created if light traveled infinitely fast. And the kinds of properties you would create, just if I were to go through that exercise, it travels infinitely fast, so it would be present everywhere at the same time, so it would be omnipresent. If anything not of the nature of light were to arise, it would, in a sense, be overcome by the nature of light. So there's an omnipotence to light. If whatever arises or disappears would occur in the fabric of light, and so there's an omniscience, because light would, in a sense, record everything that was appearing or disappearing. And then anything that occurred or disappeared, again, would be connected in the nature of light. And so there's this property of omni-nurturance, if you will. But to me, that's equivalent with, these four properties are equivalent in some sense to what we might refer to as consciousness. So there's something that's overarching, that's all present, that perhaps we can interrelate with. And to me, there's an equivalence between what light is in its primal state and what this consciousness is.
Thank you for that explanation. That was excellent. We're going to take a 2-minute break, and we will be back with Pravir in just a minute discussing cells. And we are back with Pravir Malik, and this is Community Global Internet Radio. And today we're talking about the essence of light and a few other things as well. Pravir, thank you for being with us again. And what is going on deep in our cellular world? Are we actually evolving, or are cells helping us to evolve?
Well, Dan, I think that's a very deep question, and perhaps a very comprehensive question. And I can only give some thoughts based on my understanding of light. And I'd like to go back to light to try and answer that.
Sure.
And what we had just discussed before the break was, if we were to think about light traveling infinitely fast, then there's four properties that seem to emerge, which I just call omnipresence, omnipotence, omniscience, and omninurturance. But we can think about those as presence, power, knowledge, and harmony. And these, to me, are four fundamental organizational principles that we'll see, if we look at it deeply, that structure how matter and how life emerge. So, let's go right to the level of cells. Okay. So if we think about what makes up a cell, there's four molecular plans in any living cell. And these molecular plans we know as nucleic acids, polysaccharides, lipids, and proteins. But if you ask, what's the essence of these four different molecular plans, then we'll find that, in fact, nucleic acids can be thought of as a vehicle or a carrier of light's principle of knowledge, because it has, in a sense, a library of information of how all the components in the cells will act. And if a cell divides, there's the next generation of DNA that's transmitted to the divided cells and so on. So you can see that nucleic acids is, in a sense, a carrier of knowledge. Similarly, if you think about polysaccharides, I'll say that it's a carrier of light's property of power or energy, because those sugars provide, in a sense, the energy for a cell to continue its activity. And then if we think about lipids, the molecular plan of lipids that animates a cell, I could make the case that it's a carrier of light's property of harmony, because lipids are such that they create compartments within cells, and those compartments allow division of labor and therefore the emergence of the beginnings of harmony. And if we ask what proteins are, then proteins can be thought of as a carrier or a vehicle for light's property of what I'd call presence or service. Because if we think about a human cell, there's over 30,000 different proteins that are all doing very specific tasks. So it creates this fabric of presence or service in a cell. So when you ask, what's going on inside cells, at one level, you can see right away that there's these principles of light that are animating how a cell actually organizes itself and how it continues with its functionality. But if we penetrate even deeper, so a molecular plan, after all, is a conglomeration of molecules. And so there's chains of molecules, but then if you ask, what a molecule is, you can come down to the level of atoms. And again, when we think about atoms, we can see that atoms themselves are divided into this structure of fourness or fourfoldness. So you have S shell atoms, P shell atoms, D shell atoms, and F shell atoms. That also, I would make the case, are carriers of light's properties of power, presence, knowledge, harmony. So you're seeing again the action of light at a more fundamental level inside cells, at the level of atoms. And then if you penetrate even deeper into the atoms themselves, you know that atoms are made up of quantum particles, and we know there's 4 kinds of quantum particles. There's leptons, bosons, Higgs bosons, and quarks, which again are carriers of light's properties of presence, power, knowledge, and harmony. And so you can see that within the cell, there's a universe of activity that is all organized around these 4 fundamental properties of light. However, when you ask, is a cell evolving? I think that's a very critical question, because if we ask, what's the fundamental difference between quantum particles, between atoms, and between molecular plans, very simply saying, we can say that if there's an infinite amount of potential that exists when light travels infinitely fast, then as light materializes in these forms of quantum particles, atoms, and molecular plans, more and more of that functionality that exists in light's native state materializes with that emergence of quantum particles. Even more of the potentiality materializes when atoms arise, and even more, the very fact that we have 30,000 different proteins in our living cells show that there's a vast amount of functionality. And so this functionality can now be, in a sense, more consciously molded. There's more and more functionality that's emerging at the level of cells, again, due to the action of light. And so if, we were to see the cell, or in a sense, enter into a relationship with the cell in a particular kind of way, then it makes sense that we could help it evolve, or we could help more functionality emerge more consciously at the level of cells. So I think cells is of course, we know just scientifically, is a very, very robust foundation, because it's the foundation for a vast amount of living substance. So not only do we have plants, and animals and human beings, but are so pliable and they're so flexible. And so why would it just stop at this current structure that we experience ourselves as a human being? I mean, there's no reason why it needs to stop there. And so to your question, is there an evolution? I would say yes. All the properties, whatever's required for an evolution, deeply exists inside the cell by virtue of this more and more complex kind of manifestation of what exists in light. And it's endless. The possibility is endless.
So you're saying that possibly cells have aspiration?
I think that, well, certainly as human beings, we may enter into a relationship with the cells and become aware that there's something that has aspiration in there. I can't speak, directly for the cells,
right?
I've not experienced them in that way.
Yeah.
But it's possible that yes, as they become more, as they kind of house more and more functionality, that aspiration itself would be a functionality that emerges within that structure of cells.
Yeah. Thank you. That was a great answer. Here we are in 2021, and we have some challenges in front of us as humanity. Do you have what you consider to be our greatest challenge as human beings on this planet? What would you say is our greatest challenge at this moment?
I think our greatest challenge is that I would put the context like this. We exist in a living system. I mean, the fact that you have, for instance, light that can emerge as quantum particles, that can emerge as atoms, that can emerge in cells, that has all this vast living beings created on the foundation of cells, shows that we exist in a living system. Our biggest challenge is that we so easily confine ourselves to smallness. So whether it's in our thought, whether it's in our reactions, whether it's in our habits, in the way that we see things, we get habituated to see things, experience things in a very, very small way. And that to me is our biggest challenge, because if we could reverse that, then there's, in a sense, no end to what we might experience.
Yeah, that absolutely true. That if we could see things, if we could widen ourselves to see things on a much bigger picture, it would be fabulous. Do you have anything inspirational or hopeful that you can pass along to our listeners? And also some of the things that you have done, you have, I think, an ongoing class and books. Where could people get some of the materials that you have created?
So I think that one is I have a Cosmology of Light blog that I update almost every week, and that's completely free. I have an Eventbrite, a class that people can register for through Eventbrite that is free, that occurs every 2 weeks on a Friday. It's capped at 20 people, so it's first come, first served. And then I have a whole bunch of books that I've written that are available on Amazon or Google Books in different formats, so they can be their print or their Kindle and so on. So that's potentially how people can connect more with this kind of inquiry that I've been pursuing on light. In terms of something that I would like to leave people with or your listeners with is, one is this ubiquity of light, this fact. If we can just remember that fundamentally, in this point of view, we're made from light. Light exists everywhere, and we're just beginning to tap into the possibilities of what light is and what's possible if we enter into a more conscious relationship with it. And I think it's quite easy to enter into a conscious relationship with light just by, for example, imagining light. If one were to visualize light within oneself, to me, that already forms a pretty concrete connection with what light is. And if one were to allow that connection to grow, then I think there's many different things that one would open to just naturally, and to me that's very empowering. You don't have to be of a particular kind of person or have extraordinary power, or you can anybody. It's a completely democratic instrument that's available to everyone, but it just needs to be nurtured on an individual basis.
That's wonderful. And what a wonderful way to end. So, when people hear the old "let there be light," shine a light on that, all those things, it's meaningful and it can make a difference, can't it?
I think so, yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Pravir Malik, for joining us today on The Essence, talking about light
and the cellular level.
We hope you will come back from time to time and talk to us about any topic of importance to you.
Thank you, Dad. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I enjoyed our conversation a lot, so thank you.
Thank you, Pravir.